A powerful explosion erupted in the middle of nowhere, where a fierce battle raged between a towering monster and a black-haired archer. The latter had been fighting the monster for a while until one of his arrows pierced the creature's eye, defeating it instantly. The name of this young man is Ian, who, after the battle, finally reached level 93. But he wasn't satisfied with that, so he explored the area further to find another monster, as he needed to gather around 100,000 gold before taking a vacation. And his exploration paid off as he encountered a two-headed ogre, who let out a mighty roar upon seeing him shaking the ground. The presence of this creature managed to intimidate Ian, who barely managed to dodge its attack. He achieved this thanks to his sprinting ability, which allows him to move at high speed for a certain period of time. The fight continued, and Ian received a system alert notifying him that in 1 minute, the effects of sprint would wear off. This forced Ian to think of a way to defeat the ogre within that time frame, so he attempted to attack, but couldn't, as the creature started attacking relentlessly, causing tremors and cracks with each blow of its club. Ian checked his inventory with the help of the system, looking for a tool that could help him contain the ogre's aggression, and discovered that he still had a monster trap he could use. So without hesitation, he placed it on the ground and drew the creature's attention to it. The ogre completely fell into Ian's trap, approaching him and raising its club to try to crush him. The black-haired boy carefully watched the ogre's movement as he had to dodge the attack perfectly. If he was a second late, he would most likely die. The club came down at high speed, and Ian dodged it by just a few centimeters. The blow was powerful enough to cause a large fissure in the ground, which activated the trap. The monster received a powerful electric shock, leaving it paralyzed and vulnerable. Ian drew his bowstring and, with the help of a skill, managed to accurately shoot an arrow that pierced the ogre's heart. Then Ian approached the body to check if the beast had dropped any items after being defeated, and it had. He obtained a pair of shoulder pads and warrior boots. This surprised Ian, as those pieces of armor were extremely rare to obtain. Winning the lottery was easier than getting warrior armor. These items were valued at around 5 million won. But that wasn't the only thing the ogre's body left behind. Among the items was also a Myelin's crystal. Then we are told about Kalen, which is considered the best virtual reality game in the world. It was released half a year ago and has over 10 million active users, dominating the entire industry. Due to the game's popularity, Ian couldn't help but feel drawn to try it. He bought a virtual reality capsule worth 10 million won, which is only used to play Kalen. He paid for it using his tuition money from his parents and savings from his part-time jobs. Many called Ian crazy for doing this, as he joined the game 2 months after its release, putting him behind the others. However, he managed to level up his archer in just 4 months. As if that weren't enough, the game also serves to generate money. If a player hunts a monster, it can earn 200,000 won per hour. In Ian's case, he had managed to generate millions. However, it's not a perfect game, as several issues have started to arise. A major update will be officially released soon, introducing a new region and 4 new classes. Initially, Ian's plan was to visit this new region when it launched and hunt monsters in exchange for money. But he couldn't afford to restart a character and begin from scratch, as he had made too much progress with his archer to take that risk. However, everything changed with the Myelin Crystal, an item that allows the player to access a hidden class. It's an incredibly valuable item that very few people have. The problem is that to use it, the character must be below level 10, so Ian is forced to reset his character. He notified his best friend about it, who advised him not to do it, reminding him that his archer was among the top 100 players in the game. Ian told him he was aware of that, but couldn't pass up the opportunity to use the crystal with the new classes coming in the update. If he did, he might be the first person to access a unique class in the game. But his friend wasn't convinced, reminding him that someone in the guild already had a hidden class known as Sniper, and even with its advantages, it still wasn't better than an archer. He clarified that a hidden class doesn't necessarily mean more power. This player's name is Yu-hyun. He told Ian that if he stuck with his archer, he could easily make 1 million won a day by continuing to hunt monsters. Out of curiosity, Ian asked Yu-hyun what his reasons were for playing Kalen. Yu-hyun replied that he played for fun, and Ian said the same, adding that maybe the new hidden classes would be more fun than the current ones. At these words, Yu-hyun had no choice but to let Ian reset his character. The next morning in Kalen, Ian visited a shop to buy a rebirth potion. The vendor handed it to him personally, warning him that if he reset his character, he would lose all the power he had accumulated over time, and that wouldn't be easy to recover. Ian accepted the risk and drank the rebirth potion, experiencing the effects of the reset. We switch scenes to the town of Trumman, specifically its training center. There we see an old man teaching martial techniques to new players arriving, and among them one stood out, Ian, who began to drastically raise his stats simply by training with a dummy, something that left the instructor astonished, unable to believe was possible. The new players watched Ian with envy, wondering if he was a training freak, since he hadn't changed his intense routine since arriving. Ian, for his part, remained focused on becoming stronger and couldn't afford to waste time as the biggest update in the game was only a day away. We change scenes again and see Ian returning to the world of Kalen after the update. When he logged in, he appeared in the starting city and immediately went to look for a summoner guild. Upon arrival, he was surprised that no one was in the building and wondered if he was the first person to show up. Without waiting, Ian went up the stairs and met the guild master, Kane. Kane looked at Ian intently, who requested a class change to become a summoner. Kane warned him that the class isn't easy, as not all monsters will allow themselves to be tamed. Ian laughed at the guild master's words and told him he was already aware of the hardships and was still willing to become a summoner. This surprised Kane, who, without hesitation, checked Ian's stats to verify if he met the standards for a summoner. Seeing that he did, Kane asked once more if Ian was sure he wanted to change classes, which Ian confirmed, handing over the myelin crystal, leaving Kane astonished. Kane then asked if Ian could do him a favor, and Ian agreed, thinking it might be the way to access the summoner's hidden class. Kane told him he had to tame a blue-eyed wolf, which usually appears in the plains of Tamed. He explained that his son had recently changed his class to summoner and needed that creature to continue progressing. Ian couldn't help but feel a bit nervous about the favor, as blue-eyed wolves are elite monsters above level 40, and it seems strange to assign such a mission to a level 10 player, especially for a class change. Kane noticed Ian's unease and clarified that he couldn't do it himself because he was busy with responsibilities and his son wasn't good enough to face the wolf. Kane gave Ian some magical binding books and explained that to use them, he had to wait until the wolf was tired, and when that happened, he should bind it with the books. Ian wasn't sure about accepting the mission, but Kane convinced him, saying that the wolf in the plains of Tamed was a young creature, so it shouldn't be very strong. At that moment, the system displayed a message to Ian with the mission details. It highlighted that the difficulty of the mission was rank E. This calmed Ian down a bit, and he noticed that one of the rewards was the hidden summoner class known as Monster Tamer. This motivated Ian to accept the mission, promising Kane he would return with the wolf tamed. The guildmaster was relieved to hear this and told him that if he had trouble taming the wolf, he could help a little, but only once. Later in the plains, we see Ian scouting the area looking for the wolf while analyzing Kane's words. He now better understood why Kane asked him to tame such a creature. That area had monsters averaging around level 10, and on top of that, Ian's stats were roughly equivalent to those of a level 30 player, so he shouldn't have problems. After a few hours of searching, Ian decided to use the system to track the wolf's location, finally finding it and heading there, discovering that the creature was level 20. This surprised Ian. Even though the monster wasn't a threat due to the stat difference, he couldn't believe such a mission was actually available to level 10 players. He wondered if all hidden class quests were this hard. Suddenly, Ian noticed the wolf moving, getting close to his hiding spot. Ian seized the opportunity, pulled out his bow, and hit the wolf with an arrow, drawing its attention. The creature got enraged by the attack and jumped at Ian. He grew worried, not because he was in danger, but because he had hurt the wolf badly, and one more blow could kill it. So he set his bow aside and punched the wolf in the face to stun it, which worked. He took the chance to lower its HP with punches, as taming required, bringing the creature to a specific health point. Once done, he tried to use the binding, but failed on the first attempt. This shocked Ian since the wolf had only 1 HP left, so the binding shouldn't have failed. He analyzed the situation and came up with an idea. He checked his inventory and fed the wolf some meat, healing it slightly. After the wolf ate the meat, Ian hit it again and continued trying the binding, and luckily, managed to tame it. Then he checked the system to see the time and realized he had lost a lot of time trying to capture the wolf. He assumed that by now players had already obtained their hidden classes, so he rushed back to the Summoner Guild before his slot could be taken. When he arrived, Kane was clearly surprised, as he hadn't expected Ian to tame the blue-eyed wolf in just a few hours. Ian noticed Kane's shock and asked if there was any problem with him capturing the blue-eyed wolf. Kane then explained that the hidden class quest for Monster Tamer was specifically designed for the player to fail unless they received help from the master. However, Ian had succeeded without needing that support. Ian asked Kane if he could now become a monster tamer, but Kane said no, explaining that the hidden class wasn't suitable for him. This disappointed Ian a bit, and he asked for an explanation, but Kane interrupted, asking if Ian wanted to become a master tamer instead. Ian was astonished by the sudden turn of events, as he didn't expect a class change mission to end up like this. Without hesitation, he accepted, assuming the master tamer class was far superior to monster tamer. After accepting the offer, a strange magical energy surrounded Ian's body, changing his class to Master Tamer. Now he had new stats to level up and a new section called Reputation, which now had 500 points. After Ian became a master tamer, he decided to map out his progression route, and his first objective was the Crimson Wolf, a creature featured in the game's update trailer. Later, Ian visited the plains in search of the Crimson Wolf, discovering that several players with hidden classes had already gathered there for the same purpose. Among them was another master tamer, who was attempting to capture the Crimson Wolf in front of him. Ian chose not to intervene and simply observe the situation, trying to understand the best method for capturing the creature. The group of players attacked the wolf with a fire spell, which left the monster a sliver of health. The master tamer, without hesitation, tried to bind the wolf but failed, causing the creature to escape. Ian figured it might be too soon to try capturing such a creature, as he noticed how easily it had fled. On top of that, it was a monster that was difficult to track, so he decided to explore the area for other creatures in order to test out his new stat called Leadership. During his search, he came across a pack of wolves near a canyon and caught their attention using his bow, starting a fight. He came out victorious without difficulty and managed to capture the wolves. He then checked each of their stats and discovered that monsters have their own personalities, and on top of that, each one specialized in different areas, which made their stats vary from one to another. This surprised Ian, who drew his own conclusions and decided to brandish his bow to hunt more wolves, aiming to find the strongest one among them. This would not only provide him with a strong companion, but would also help raise his class attributes. So he took a day off to exclusively hunt wolves. His plan was to keep only the strongest and release the weaker ones, but this method didn't work out well for him, as he had bad luck finding wolves with good stats and beneficial personalities. However, he didn't give up and continue with the same approach. Because he had captured so many wolves over the course of the hours, he ended up earning a title, Wolf Specialist, which gave him a special ability that allowed him to detect the strongest wolves in a pack without needing to fight them or capture them to find out. Ian didn't hesitate to complain about this kind of ability, since he would have preferred that such features apply to all monsters. Still, he didn't dwell on it and took advantage of the new ability to analyze the wolves he encountered, being able to see their levels, personalities, and stats. Each one was marked by a color representing their rarity, and among them, a wolf labeled with a green color stood out. This caught Ian's attention, and he faced the creature, hitting it only with his bow, avoiding arrows to prevent injuring it too much. After defeating the wolf, he captured it and checked its stats more thoroughly, discovering that it was a monster with the ability to evolve. This piqued Ian's curiosity, and he decided to release all the wolves that were no longer useful and focus on training this specific one, which he nicknamed Lee. To his surprise, giving the nickname increased his affinity with Lai, which boosted its loyalty and reduced the risk of rebellion. This startled Ian a bit, as he hadn't expected that monsters could actually betray their summoner if their loyalty wasn't high enough. Still, he didn't waste any more time and went to hunt more monsters accompanied by Lai, aiming to level him up until he could evolve. Meanwhile, in real life, we see Yu-Hyun researching summoners on the game forums, as he had doubts about whether the class was actually useful in combat. In his research, he found posts implying that the summoner class was pretty bad. Among them, one stood out, a post from a player in the global rankings who gave his opinion on the hidden summoner class. He mentioned that the biggest disadvantage was that monsters earned very little experience, making the pace of progression far too slow for the game's demands. Yu-Hyun started to worry about this, wondering if Ian was doing okay with his class. He didn't want to jump to conclusions since the class was still very new and people didn't know how to use it yet. Still, he couldn't deny his concern. After all, Ian had reset his character just to try out the hidden class. Back in Kalen, we see Ian and Lai hunting elite enemies that were much lower in level than them. In just a few hours, Ian reached level 20 along with Lai. This now allowed him to join a guild, bringing his reunion with Yu-Hyun closer. Even though he had reached level 20, Ian continued hunting monsters. This time, he encountered a fox. Without hesitation, he pulled out his bow and ordered Lee to attack after him. The wolf followed Ian's command and waited for the arrow to hit the fox. Once it did, Lai pounced on the creature, biting it hard. The fox endured Lai's damage and counterattacked. Despite the difference in power, Lai didn't back down or show fear and kept fighting. This surprised Ian since Lai's level and stats were much lower than the fox's, and under normal circumstances, he should have run away, but he didn't. Ian wondered if this was due to Lai's personality. Ian decided to support the battle a little by shooting another arrow at the fox. Without meaning to, he ended up defeating it, robbing Lai of the chance to land the final blow. That's when Ian realized that experience was now being split between them, something that hadn't happened before reaching level 20, and this changed his plans. He had originally intended to keep leveling until Lai reached level 15. But before continuing, he decided to take a break and use the time to train Lee using a default skill from the Master Tamer class, Thanks to this training, Lai received a boost that improved his potential as a summon, meaning that his attributes would double with each level up. After training Lai for a while, Ian finally got him to level 15, something that took a lot of effort since progress was slow simply because the experience was being split. Still, he didn't deny that training Lai was fun and he had grown fond of him. Ian then checked the system and browsed the area's bestiary. He asked Lai if he felt like hunting some bears to level up a bit more, something the wolf agreed to. After all, this would be his first time hunting a bear. Ian could see Lai's excitement about fighting bears, so he led him to a bridge where bear packs would appear. Thanks to this, Ian gained some class experience and obtained a new skill and a passive ability. Before fighting the bears, Ian checked the system to see what his new class powers did. He discovered that he could now increase the attack power of both himself and his summons, with the boost lasting a maximum of 20 minutes. Meanwhile, his new passive increased his leadership stat, allowing him the chance to tame a bear. He wondered if bears could become as strong as Lai. Without hesitation, he descended from the bridge and captured one to test his theory, noticing that his leadership attribute increased drastically. However, he was disappointed to see that, stat-wise, Lai was much stronger than the bear he captured, so he released the bear. He then started searching nearby bear packs to defeat them with Lai and looked for a bear that might stand out among the rest. In his first attempt, he tested his new skills in battle, surprised to see that Lai could now fight in sync with him. He guessed it might be due to the leadership attribute. One of the bears tried to ambush them, but Lai distracted it by biting sensitive areas, and Ian took the opportunity to attack it with several arrows, allowing Lai to finish it off with the final blow. After the bear was defeated, the experience gained increased drastically for both of them, and Lai instantly jumped to level 19. However, Ian himself was falling behind as leveling up with a summon was costing him too much experience. He figured that maybe doing quests would provide better experience to level up more easily. But he couldn't risk doing a quest just yet, so he decided to log out of the game to rest and sleep. Back in real life, Ian checked the game forums to research more about the hidden summoner class. All he found were a bunch of complaints about the class. This seemed strange to him at first, as all the complaints came from players who were barely level 12. So he tried looking for any summoners over level 15 on the forums, since that's when the class stat boosts began to become noticeable. To his surprise, there was no one else in the game who had reached above level 15 as a summoner, making him the only summoner to reach level 20. Eventually, though, we found the second highest level summoner, a level 13 player who had a skill allowing them to merge their soul with their summon. This let them fight in melee combat, and if that weren't enough, it also prevented the experience from being split between them. This information confused Ian as he didn't have that skill. He analyzed the situation. While it was very useful for leveling faster, it made summons weaker, so the ability wouldn't have been useful to him. That's when he realized something important: the skills of hidden class summoners were very different from his own. So he decided to research further, wanting to uncover the differences between a monster tamer and a master tamer. In his research, Ian discovered that master tamers lose all combat abilities, unlike monster tamers. However, the class compensates for this by making summons not only stronger but also allowing players to strengthen their bond with them, greatly reducing the risk of rebellion, something monster tamers cannot do. The next morning, Ian returned to the game with a single goal in mind: to get Lai to level 20. As soon as he logged in, he went to hunt bears with him, letting Lai deliver the finishing blows to gain more experience. Things progressed quickly for both of them, as Lai could now deal great damage to bears without relying on Ian. This made Ian proud, so he started looking for larger bear packs to hunt. He found one of those packs deep in the forest, and there he saw a bear much larger than the others. This caught Ian's attention, and he decided to analyze the bear, discovering that it was marked with a yellow color, meaning its rarity was much higher than Lai's. Ian wondered if he would be able to tame it and use the system to simulate it. He found out that his leadership wasn't high enough to tame that bear, something that surprised him as he considered his leadership to be quite advanced. Even so, he took the risk of facing it and leaped forward, firing arrows that hit the bear straight in the chest. Lee seized the moment to attack the bear's neck, but the bear shoved him back with a charge. However, the blow didn't deal significant damage to Lei. The latter noticed that the bear needed to recover some mobility after that charge, so he jumped straight at its neck, biting down with such force that he ended up defeating it. As a result, Lai gained a large amount of experience and leveled up to 20. Ian was thrilled to see Lai reach level 20, which meant they could now properly progress through the game. It's explained that all players are required to reach level 20 in order to access all game content, since at that level, guild records, instant dungeons, national quests, and more are unlocked. Ian congratulated Lei with a hug and then checked the loot dropped by the bear, finding among them a hammer and a necklace. Ian was surprised to see the necklace as it was an item he had never seen before, so he used an identification scroll to find out what it did. After identifying it, he was amazed by its stats. The necklace could reduce skill cooldown times, and in addition to that, it increased both health points and intelligence. Without hesitation, he equipped the necklace. Then he checked Lai's stats to see how much his attributes had increased after leveling up, and noticed that every stat had increased drastically. This puzzled Ian a bit, and he wondered if perhaps stat increases for summons upon leveling were random. But he discarded that idea and instead carefully analyzed Lai's abilities, remembering that he possessed a trait known as potential. He concluded that maybe the potential trait caused Lai's base stats to increase dramatically with each level, confirming his theory that hidden classes come with special traits, and the same applies to monsters, whose strength varies based on their potential stat. He suspected there might be a way to directly increase that hidden potential, so he reviewed his own stats and distributed his experience points into the beginner training category, since that category helped players level up faster and gain better stat increases. After distributing all his points, the category changed. He had reached the maximum mastery level as a beginner, and the category evolved into a better one called intermediate training. According to the system, intermediate training gives the summoner several new talents, one of which is the ability to train a monster's potential, increasing its power. As if that weren't enough, the higher the level of intermediate training, the better the boost a summon would get to its potential, meaning even more power. Thanks to this information, Ian was able to better understand how the Master Tamer system works, and without hesitation, he continued hunting monsters. Later, in real life, we see Ian having lunch while browsing the game forums. He came across a video of a player with the Dark Mage class, one of the hidden classes added in the game's update. Ian analyzed the video and was surprised to see that the mage could also perform summons, although they were related to necromancy. Suddenly, Ian received a call from an unknown number. This surprised him, and he answered to find out who it was. On the other end of the line was a girl who introduced herself as Lee Ji-hyun, an assistant at the Virtual Reality Research Lab at Korea University. This surprised Ian, and he asked if she needed anything, to which Ji-hyun replied yes, informing him that Professor Lee Jin-wook wanted to speak with him about his university grades. This scared Ian a little, as he feared he might be expelled due to his low grades. Nervously, Ian asked what would happen if he chose not to speak with Professor Jin-wook. Ji-hyun recommended that he take the meeting, warning him that the professor would send his report card directly to his home, meaning his parents would see his low marks. This terrified Ian, knowing his father would send him to work on a farm as punishment, so he promised Ji-hyun that he would speak to Jin-wook personally about his grades. After the call, Ian searched for Jin-wook's number, which took him a while to find, and he called him. When the professor answered, Ian introduced himself and asked why he wanted to talk. Jin-wook brought up his grades, telling him they were very low again, and that if he continued like this, he'd be expelled soon from the university. Ian said he couldn't let that happen, clarifying that so far he had only received 2 Fs in his entire academic career, and he would need a 3rd F to be expelled. Jin-wook acknowledged that Ian was right on that point, but added that he could still use his position to give him a 3rd F if he wanted to. This irritated Ian a little, realizing his professor was blackmailing him, and he asked if he needed a favor. Jin-wook didn't respond to that, and instead asked why Ian was putting his university future at risk. Ian didn't know how to answer, since if he told the truth that he had been playing Kalen, he would likely be expelled, so he tried to change the story a little. He told Jin-wook that he had been researching the game Kalen, since it was the focus of global attention in the VR world. Jin-wook didn't buy it. He knew Ian was addicted to the game and asked about his character's level, stating that if he was supposedly researching it, then he should be in the global rankings. Ian thought carefully about his response, realizing he couldn't lie so easily. After all, he had reset his character just to try a new class, so he told the truth and spoke about his level 93 archer, who had once been among Korea's top 100 players. But he had recently reset and was now level 20 as a Master Tamer. Jin-wook burst into laughter, thinking Ian was lying. However, Ian insisted he was telling the truth and proposed a bet. Jin-wook accepted and told Ian he would have to reach level 93 before the semester started again. Only then could he prove his words were real. If he failed, his grades and warnings would be sent to his parents, along with an expulsion letter. He clarified that he was accepting this bet because the university was also researching this game, so if Ian was telling the truth, he might actually contribute something. However, even with the bet, Ian was still required to attend all university lectures, something he had no choice but to agree to. Jin-wook promised that if Ian succeeded in this feat, he wouldn't send the grades to his parents. Instead, he'd modify them to give him an A+ across the board. Ian saw a golden opportunity in those words and asked if Jin-wook was truly willing to accept that risk something the professor confirmed. Once the call ended, Ian didn't hesitate to return to Kalen, and the first thing he did was hunt monsters with Lai. Along the way, he told Lai about his goal to reach the global rankings before the semester began, promising him that they would take the easiest route to level up. After hunting some monsters, Ian visited a specific building to join a guild, and returned to the Lotus Guild, the same one Yuhyun belonged to. The building's owner told him that Lotus only accepts players above level 60, but he could still submit an application and hope to get lucky. Ian agreed to send his application. After doing so, he checked the list of online players, hoping to find one of the leaders to inform them of his return, but they were all offline. Still, he believed they might recognize him, so he proceeded to the next step in his progression route and traveled to the game's free market. There, he looked for the strongest weapons and equipment available for his current level. That's when an idea struck him. He wondered if there was a weapon that could increase his stats as a master tamer. After some time searching, he found the first item for tamers, a tiara that boosted health, evasion, and the attack power of summons. Ian didn't hesitate to buy it and equipped it. Now that he had this item, he could more easily track down the equipment needed by master tamers. He also geared up with a staff. It was his first time using a weapon like that, as he specialized in bows. But he decided to change his combat style a bit so he could win the bet as soon as possible. Once he was properly equipped, he left the market to look for the mission board with Lei. As soon as Ian arrived at the mission board, several players began criticizing him, claiming that summoners were a very weak class due to their slow progression. Ian ignored all the negative comments from the players and went straight to look for the Goblin Camp mission, as it was known for giving a lot of experience to level 20 players. After a long search, he finally found the mission, which was being handed out by a character named Lapierre. When Lapierre saw Ian, he recognized him immediately and greeted him without hesitation. Ian asked if the goblins had been causing problems recently with their camps, to which Lapierre confirmed and asked if Ian already had a group of players prepared for the mission. Ian told him that this time he would be completing the mission solo, something that surprised Lapierre, but he didn't doubt Ian's strength and handed him the mission. Upon reviewing the mission details, Ian realized that Lapierre had already assigned him a group of players, confirming that he was forced to complete it alongside others. Ian wondered who he could recruit, as he was sure no one from Lotus could help due to the level difference. He asked Lapierre to hold the mission for him until he could personally gather a group. Lapierre agreed to wait and instead gave him a different mission that he could complete solo. Ian had no choice but to accept. He then checked the list of online players and found Yuhyun. Without hesitation, he messaged him and asked to be accepted into the guild. Yuhyun didn't hesitate and added Ian to the guild. Ian joined the guild chat and asked his friends if they knew any players around level 40 who could accompany him on the Goblin Camp mission, telling them about his plan to level up quickly. His guild mates had doubts at first, as it was difficult to find someone at that level in the guild. However, one of them named Gawain mentioned a friend of his, a priest with the chef profession, who could join, although he warned she wasn't very good in combat. Ian replied that it didn't matter, he just needed one more player to meet the mission requirement, clarifying that he could complete the mission on his own. Gawain hesitated for a moment but decided to trust Ian and promised to let him know if his friend logged into the game so they could do the mission together. After the conversation, Ian went off to complete the solo mission given to him by Lapierre. On his way, he encountered several level 30 monsters. He trusted that Lei could defeat them, but he also recognized that he couldn't rely on Lei alone, so he thought about temporarily taming one of the nearby monsters. At that moment, Lei walked away from Ian. The latter was surprised by this behavior and wondered if he and Lei could share thoughts, something confirmed when he noticed Lei's expression of anger. Ian tried to calm Lei down, and to his surprise, Lei began to evolve. This shocked Ian, as he didn't know what the requirements were for a summon to evolve. He immediately checked the system and discovered that Lei's potential had reached 100. He figured that might be the reason behind the evolution. This raised many questions for Ian, but he couldn't deny he was excited to see Lei evolve and wondered if his appearance would change. He hoped so, because if Lei grew large enough, he could become a mount and help Ian travel faster. The evolution took a while until it finally culminated in a powerful explosion of energy, and Lei appeared before Ian, now transformed into a blood wolf. In addition, a system message popped up for Ian, stating that because the evolution was successful, his intermediate training category had leveled up. As if that weren't enough, he was the first player in the entire game to successfully trigger an evolution. As a reward, he received 1,000 fame points along with 1,530 points in affinity and leadership. This made Ian happy, as it meant he could now tame much stronger monsters. To celebrate, he hugged Lei. Out of curiosity, he checked Lei's stats and discovered that Lei could still evolve further. On top of that, now that he was a blood wolf, he could deal critical damage and steal life from enemies. What surprised Ian the most about all these changes was that Lai still had more evolutions to go. He wondered if Lai might eventually gain access to a unique class, the rarest and highest tier among summons. Unable to contain his excitement, Ian decided to spoil Lai a bit, promising not to tame any other monsters of the wolf species, declaring that Lai was the best of them all. This made Lai happy, and now that Ian had regained some trust with him, he asked if he could now ride on Lai's back. With a growl, Lai confirmed it, and without hesitation, Ian mounted him. He was amazed by this, as it would significantly accelerate his level-up progress, so he put Lai to the test with a sprint. The wolf ran through the area with excitement. At first, Ian struggled to adapt to Lai's incredible speed, but he eventually got used to it. He then traveled to the Somers Valley to complete Lepierre's mission. Once there, Ian couldn't help but feel the cold, so he dismounted from Lai and began searching for goblins. He wanted to test Lai's new abilities, so he gave the order to hunt and have fun until satisfied, but not before buffing him with blessings, part of his summoner skill set. Within minutes, Lai found a group of goblins, 3 in total. Ian asked to attack first this time, explaining that he would do his best to cover Lai from any surprise attacks. Lai didn't hesitate and attacked the group of goblins. With his massive jaws, he bit one of them on the neck, tearing through the area. Though the goblin survived the initial bite, it didn't last long, as the bleeding eventually killed it. This surprised Ian, as those goblins were around level 40. In theory, Lai shouldn't have been able to defeat them with a single attack, yet he could, and this gave Ian an idea. Caught up in the excitement, Ian got distracted, and one of the goblins attacked Lai from his blind spot, striking his back with a club. This enraged Lai, who retaliated with a violent slash that tore the goblin apart. Thanks to his blood wolf properties, Lai absorbed the monster's life and healed the damage he'd taken. He did the same to the last goblin standing, striking with such speed that the goblin had no time to defend itself. Ian watched in awe and approached to pet Lai as a reward. Now with Lai's power, Ian felt confident enough to attempt much harder missions than the goblin one. Still, he preferred not to take too many risks for now. Despite Lai's strength, he couldn't fully rely on him, and monsters at that level could still kill Ian in one hit if he let his guard down. After petting Lai a bit more, Ian continued the mission and looked for more goblins, using Lai's sense of smell. It only took a while before they found several more. Trusting Lai's skills, Ian let him fight while he waited for a message from Gawain, which arrived shortly, letting him know that his friend was online. Ian asked for her contact info, which Gawain provided. Ian then called Lee over to go meet this girl named Heron. On the way, Gawain asked if Heron would really be enough, reminding him that she didn't really know how to fight. Still, Ian assured him everything would be fine, telling him that at that very moment he was in the Somer Valley defeating goblins, and thanks to that, he had gained 5 levels in one go. This surprised Gawain, who asked if Ian was using any cheat program or exploiting a bug to level up so fast, warning that such things were severely punished. Ian assured him he wasn't using anything like that. Gawain trusted him, and Ian took the opportunity to promise that he'd reach level 100 in 2 months. With Lai's power, he planned to surpass even the level required in his bet with Jin Wook. After chatting a bit more with Gawain, Ian contacted Heron and asked for her location. She told him she was in the town of Lucane getting her equipment fixed at the blacksmith. Since the town was far away, Ian used the opportunity to gain some exploration experience and asked Heron to wait for him at the forge. Once in town, Ian met Heron and introduced himself. Heron looked at him with a bit of excitement and introduced herself as well, taking the opportunity to say that Gawain had told her a lot about him and his feats in the Lotus Guild. She was happy to help in any way she could. Curious, Ian asked if she was really Gawain's friend, which she denied, clarifying that she was actually his older sister. She then said she had all of her tools ready for the Goblin Camp mission and asked if Ian was ready. He confirmed he was and asked what her reasons were for taking on the Goblin Camp mission. Heron replied that she needed an item from that mission to complete a recipe from Chef Duke, which was required for her to progress as a chef. This confused Ian a bit. He hadn't expected professions to have missions as well, especially something like a chef class. He had never played it because it seemed boring to him. However, Ian didn't want to be rude to Heron, so he asked if her class had any specialties related to being a chef. She confirmed this, explaining that her class is food-related and she gains attribute bonuses by leveling up her chef profession. She also revealed that in real life, she works in the culinary field, which makes it easier for her to level up that profession. This surprised Ian a bit, and he deduced that perhaps real-life skills could influence a character's abilities inside Kalen. As they walked toward Lepierre's mission location, Ian told Herin she was the first cook he had met in all his time playing and asked if she could cook something for him the next time they met. She agreed to the request and accompanied Ian back to Lepierre's location. Upon seeing them, Lapierre congratulated Ian for bringing a companion. He mentioned that more players were needed to complete the mission, but said he'd make an exception because he knew how strong Ian could be. He told them that a group had recently headed to the goblin camp, and if they hurried, they could catch up and get help from them. He then handed over the mission. Ian noticed that some mission details had changed, but the rewards were still the same, which relieved him a little. So he accepted the mission and summoned Lai to use as a mount. When Heron saw Lai, she couldn't help but be startled. Ian reassured her, explaining that Lai was his summon. This amazed Heron, who guessed that Ian was his summoner, and asked how it was possible for him to be doing the goblin camp mission when the secret classes had only been added days ago. Ian didn't know how to respond. If he revealed he was level 25, Heron might leave the party, so he gave her an excuse, saying he got lucky in taming Lai, who levels up quickly and can easily handle goblins. Heron believed him and said that even though she was level 45, she usually runs away when she sees goblins. She admitted she felt a bit envious of someone like Ian. He tried to hold back a laugh, not expecting her to believe him so easily. To avoid sounding suspicious, Ian told her she might end up getting something unique too, just like him, explaining that the chef profession was part of the content added in the game's update, and if she focused on it, she might even surpass him. Inside, Ian felt a little guilty for lying to her, but also surprised that Heron couldn't fight goblins despite being level 45. Typically, players at that level could defeat a goblin even without a combat specialization. Heron thanked Ian for his support and said she genuinely wanted to focus on cooking. She clarified that it was the most fun part of the game for her, since she gets frustrated easily during fights and can't quite grasp the combat system. She took the opportunity to compliment Lee's appearance, saying she had met other summoners before but had never seen one with a blood wolf. Ian smiled proudly and told her that Lee was probably the only powerful summon she ever see on the entire Korean server. This surprised Heron, and she asked if his wolf had a name. Ian confirmed it and told her. Lai walked up to Heron to greet her, and she petted him a little, quickly earning his trust. At that moment, Heron got an idea and asked Ian if summons could eat. He confirmed they could, and Heron used her cooking skills to prepare a smoked steak for Lai. Lai confidently ate the steak, and thanks to Heron's chef abilities, his stats increased, gaining more health points, though the effect would only last 20 minutes. Ian was surprised and checked the system to see the changes Lai had undergone after eating Heron's food. She noticed Ian didn't seem very familiar with the chef profession, so she explained some of its uses. She revealed that up to a certain level, prepared meals can grant players buffs for a limited time. And these same benefits can also apply to summons. Ian analyzed the situation and realized that Heron was far too valuable to only be a one-time mission partner, so he set a personal goal to stay close to her. Not missing the opportunity, Ian asked if she could prepare something for him too, since he wanted a buff for the mission. But Heron declined, saying she had used up her basic ingredients to feed Lai. However, she promised to cook something for him after the mission as a reward. We changed scenes to the Somewhere Canyon, where we meet Hugo, the leader of a mercenary band that intended to eliminate the goblin camp for Lapierre's mission. He had been informed by Lapierre himself that reinforcements would be arriving to help with the mission, so he took his time waiting for them, even though they were quite delayed. But eventually they arrived, and those reinforcements were none other than Ian and Heron. Hugo greeted them and thanked them both for volunteering to help. Ian analyzed the group to see if they could be trusted and noticed that some members seemed disturbed, which made him wonder if something bad had happened while they waited. Still, he didn't pay much attention to it. After all, he intended to complete the mission with Heron alone. The group led by Hugo moved toward the camp and were greeted by a large goblin army, all heavily armed. Hugo wasn't intimidated by their numbers and ordered the players to split into units, sending the first one to attack. The first wave of players raised their weapons bravely in charge of the goblins, who retaliated without hesitation, initiating a bloody battle between both sides. Heron and Ian observed the situation from a distance, and Heron asked if he would really be okay fighting alone. Ian affirmed, asking her to simply follow the plan he had explained on their way to the mission. It's explained that the plan involved Heron drawing the goblins' attention, since she had high shield proficiency, thanks to her fear of fighting, which gave her excellent defense that made it hard for monsters to land hits. So her goal was to attract the goblins and block with her shield, while Ian and Lai eliminated them. On top of that, Heron's shield skills could surpass even level 60 players in one-on-one duels, and even against groups, so despite being timid, she could handle large numbers of monsters without issue. Heron looked at Ian with doubt, not fully believing in her shield capabilities, but she placed her trust in him, especially since he was from the Lotus Guild, which she admired. Suddenly, a goblin noticed them and lunged to attack. Heron panicked but quickly raised her staff and summoned a magical shield, blocking the goblin's attack. More goblins arrive, attracted by the shield's presence. Ian allowed them to pile up a bit. To ensure the plan was going smoothly, he asked Heron how much sacred power she had left. She told him she could hold on for about 10 more minutes. This surprised Ian a little. Maybe he had underestimated her despite her being level 40. So he summoned Lee, and together they began taking down the incoming goblins. The two were well synchronized while Heron served as bait. To Ian's surprise, Lee could dominate the goblins, devouring them without difficulty and gaining large amounts of experience, even though it was being split between the three of them. It didn't matter much though, as there were so many goblins that the loss of experience was more than compensated. In just minutes, Ian reached level 27, gaining 2 levels in such a short time, proving that his plan was more than successful. He didn't hesitate to continue with it, trusting in Heron's shielding abilities, and of course in Lie's power. While the plan unfolded, another player witnessed Ian's feat and wondered how someone like him could pull it off, or if he even had the required level to defeat the goblins. This player decided to call over his companions Falcon and Millen, who came over to see what was happening and witnessed Ian and Lie's feat for themselves. Millen remarked that he was just a summoner and there was nothing special about that, but Falcon corrected her, saying the issue wasn't that he was a summoner, it was his level. To handle goblins at that camp, you needed to be at least level 40, but based on Ian and Lie's performance, they were fighting at a power level above 60. That kind of feat should be impossible, especially if Ian was level 40. Considering how recently the new class was added, he should be around level 20 at most. Falcon added that according to official forums, the strongest confirmed summoners were only level 17 or 18. He suspected that Ian might not be a real summoner, but instead using an enchanted artifact that lets him summon monsters. The player said he'd come to the same conclusion and proposed to Falcon and Millan that they attack Ian and Heron. If the wolf came from an artifact, they just needed to steal it to render Ian useless. Millan couldn't believe he was seriously suggesting that, pointing out that the idea was reckless. They didn't have good enough gear to recover from a failed attempt, and if they failed, they'd be flagged by the system as PKs, player killers. The guy insisted on fighting, revealing that summoner artifacts usually sell for 20 million gold. If they could steal Ions, they could sell it and become rich in-game. These words convinced Falcon, who said he was willing to fight. He told Millan that in-game gold could be exchanged for real money, and 20 million gold was worth 40 million won. Hearing this, Millan agreed to fight. So the group put together a plan to ambush Ian. Meanwhile, Ian, Heron, and Lie continued executing their strategy, gaining a ton of levels in a short time. Ian took a short break to check his stats in the system and saw he was close to reaching level 30. At that level, he would gain 2 special class skills, which made him wonder what kind of powers he'd receive as a master tamer. It's explained that according to the forums, special class skills are random, but Ian disagreed. He claimed these skills could be earned manually, as the system assigns unique skills after analyzing the player's profile. These abilities are an extension of the player's most proficient trait. In other words, if a player specializes in melee weapons, their class skill would likely be related to that weapon type, further enhancing their expertise. In Ian's case, he specialized in training summons, so if he reached level 30, he would receive a unique skill related to that training. Since he had intermediate training, which increased the hidden potential of summons, there was a chance that, upon reaching level 30, he would gain a skill tied to that hidden potential. Ian remained distracted, checking his stats, at least until Heron called for his attention, warning that she had only 5% of her mana left. This worried Ian, who ordered Lee to protect her and advised Heron to fall back to a safe area, saying that the first phase of their plan was now complete. Lee didn't hesitate and fiercely protected Heron. He trusted her. The goblins tried to flee as Lee approached, but it was useless. His claws reached them all. Heron took a breather and thanked Lee for his help, petting him gently. Ian watched the scene and noticed that Lee seemed to have formed a deep bond of friendship with Heron. This made Ian realize how complex the summoning system really was, and he wondered if that could have any impact later on. So Ian asked Lee to focus on completing the mission, interrupting his moment with Heron. This, of course, annoyed Lee a little, and he shot a slightly angry glare at Ian. Meanwhile, at the goblin camp, the goblin leader watched the battle from a hilltop. He couldn't deny that the humans were advancing far faster than he had expected, so he ordered his strongest soldiers to attack the player group. However, this order was pointless, as the camp was suddenly hit by a massive magical explosion caused by a staff wielded by one of Hugo's teammates. But the goblin leader didn't back down. He immediately countered with a dark magic spell, taking down several players. This caught Hugo's attention, who assumed this had to be the goblin boss. Without hesitation, Hugo ordered his team to focus solely on that goblin, affirming that if they defeated him, the mission would be completed. Thanks to this command, Ian received a power boost. Hugo's class allowed him to boost his allies' morale, which led to an increase in their stats. The players, fueled with courage, charged at the boss, Ian joined them with Lai, taking care of the goblins that continued to appear, clearing a path for the players facing the boss directly. To Ian's surprise, Lai was also affected by Hugo's morale boost, receiving a stat increase of his own. He tore through the goblins without effort, then set his sights on the boss and attacked without hesitation. The goblin boss was surprised to see Lai and, using a dark spell, tried to turn him against Ian. But the attempt failed, thanks to the deep bond of trust and friendship between Ian and Lai. Lee took advantage of the boss, letting his guard down and bit him in the neck, landing a critical blow that nearly defeated him. The boss, in panic, used a healing spell, barely saving himself, then entered a berserker state, making him far more dangerous. Despite this, Hugo gave the order to keep attacking. He didn't seem intimidated by the monster's second phase, at least not until the goblin began preparing a magic spell. Ian recognized the spell immediately and warned everyone to fall back, shouting that it was Fear Fire, a spell that could instantly kill any player if hit directly. Some players were caught in the blast. Ian managed to dodge it, but the residual effects were strong enough to knock him to the ground from the pain. He checked his system and realized the spell's damage was extreme. He could die. He tried to use the emergency aid feature to heal himself, but stopped when he was suddenly surrounded by a magical aura. The aura came from Heron, who had healed Ian from a distance using a spell called Healing Light. Ian was shocked. Only elite priests could acquire that skill. He took back everything he had thought earlier about Heron. He had clearly underestimated her. He thanked her for the help. Then Ian summoned his magical bow and told Lei to try to draw the boss's attention, clarifying that he should only attack if necessary and not overexert himself. Without hesitation, Lei charged at the goblin boss while Ian drew his arrow, waiting for the perfect moment. He knew that a single mistake now would ruin everything. The goblin could cast Fear Fire again, and this time, no one would escape. Hugo realized Ian's plan and decided to help with the distraction. He took a hit from Fear Fire head-on, barely surviving it. That gave Lai a chance to get close, drawing the goblin's attention. As the boss prepared to attack again, Ian saw his chance and released the arrow, striking the creature square in the brain. Because he caught it off guard, the blow was a critical fatal hit, killing the goblin boss. The surviving players raised their weapons in celebration of Ian's feat. Since he had contributed the most and landed the final blow, Ian was rewarded with 124 fame points and 6,470 experience, reaching level 30. With that, he unlocked 2 new class skills, assigned skill to Familiar and Spatial Swap. The latter caught Ian's attention, and he tried to read its effects, but was interrupted by Hugo approaching. Ian and Hugo locked eyes, both showing mutual respect as they shook hands. Hugo told Ian that without him, the mission would have been much harder and might have failed, and he wanted to thank him personally. Ian humbly replied that he was just doing his job as support and gave all the credit to Hugo, stating that without his leadership, the mission would have failed, even if Ian had been there to help. Hugo wished Ian good luck and said goodbye, leaving with his team for the next city. Ian returned to Lei to congratulate him as well, rewarding him with a few pets, and took a break to review his new skills. Reading the descriptions, Ian confirmed his theory. He had obtained a skill related to the hidden potential of familiars, assigned skill to Familiar. This ability not only allowed him to give powers to Lai, but it also increased Lai's hidden potential points. If a familiar already had a skill, it could be replaced with a stronger one. If Ian could master this new power, his summon's attributes would drastically improve, and they would level up even faster. He checked Lai's current potential points, now at 6. But since he had leveled up with Lai, he could increase them. Still, he wondered if it was a good idea to spend his 100 points now. He decided to save them, aiming to eventually buy a unique skill for Lai, even if it meant waiting a little longer. If everything went according to plan, Lai could evolve again, already equipped with a unique skill. It was very likely that evolution would enhance it even further. Next, Ian read his second skill, Spatial Swap, which gave the summoner the ability to swap places with their summon. However, he needed to be unarmed for 1 second to activate it. Additionally, if he increased his competence stat, the cooldown for Spatial Swap would be reduced, meaning he could use it more frequently. Ian admitted the skill was very useful, though he was slightly disappointed it wasn't an offensive or capture-based ability like he had hoped. After a while, Heron returned after collecting her mission rewards and thanked Ian for his help. He tried to compliment her, saying that she deserved credit for the mission, and that without her healing spell, he wouldn't have been able to complete it, even with Hugo's support. Heron took the opportunity to pet Lei, praising the wolf's combat skills. At that moment, Falcon, Millen, and their leader appeared to carry out their ambush. Ian noticed them approaching and stayed alert. The group's leader introduced himself as Rukin, extending his hand to Ian and apologizing for not introducing himself earlier during the mission. Ian didn't lower his guard, but played along and shook his hand, introducing himself as well. Rukin offered Ian a chance to join his group, saying they were about to start another mission and might need his help. He then mentioned the hidden goblin camp mission. Ian suspected he was referring to the High Priest mission, a quest he had initially intended to skip because he wasn't strong enough, but now that he was level 30, it seemed more plausible, though still risky. Curious, Ian checked Rukin's stats and saw that he was level 50. This struck him as odd, since the High Priest mission required a much higher level, so he probed a bit, asking which mission Rukin was referring to. Rukin, no fool, realized Ian was already suspicious and came clean, telling him about the High Priest goblin who appeared in a cave near the main boss's location, and that defeating him would complete the secret mission. He clarified that the High Priest could be stronger or weaker than the goblin boss. Everything seemed believable to Ian, until Rukin mentioned an invocation artifact referring to the necklace Ian was wearing. At that moment, Ian immediately realized Rukin's true intentions. He assumed Rukin believed Ian was summoning Lai through an artifact. Ian was already aware of such items, they were expensive, and deduced that Rukin and his group planned to kill him, steal his gear, and sell it on the market for real-world money. Even though he was aware of the danger, Ian considered going with them. After all, defeating the High Priest would benefit his level in progress, and he already had a plan to deal with Rukin and his group. So Ian asked Rukin and his group to wait, saying he needed to discuss it with his party member. At that moment, when they let their guard down, he secretly sent a private message to Heron through the in-game chat. Then, in front of Rukin, he asked Heron if she was interested in doing the mission. Now that the group's attention was on her, Ian took the opportunity to alert her that Rukin and his team were planning to kill them. He clarified that they could only do it during the High Priest mission. Heron asked if he had a plan, but Ian didn't respond. He just asked her to say whether she'd go or not. Heron looked at Rukin, Millen, and Falcon and said she'd join the mission only if they agreed to share it. Rukin smiled, thinking things were working in his favor, and shared the mission with them. Via chat, Heron again asked Ian about his plan, and he assured her he had an idea to deal with them and complete the High Priest mission without taking real risks. Meanwhile, on a remote hill, we see Jin Wook admiring Kalen's landscape. He had just finished one of his research projects on the virtual world and admitted that the game represented a huge scientific breakthrough. He used the moment to eat a little and summoned a wolf to feed as well, because like Ian, Jin Wook was a master tamer. During his break, Jin Wook thought back to his bet with Ian, wondering if the boy was still playing Kalen and what class he might have chosen. Perhaps even a summoner, like himself. Back with Ian, we see him entering the High Priest's cave alongside Rukin, Millen, Falcon, and Heron. The group stayed together at first, progressing through the cave without issue and defeating the goblins that appeared. Falcon was in charge of giving orders and organizing the attacks, assigning the heavy work to Ian. Ian already had a good idea of their plan, so he did everything he could to conserve as much energy as possible. He even asked Heron to do the same through a message. Rukin, for his part, stayed alert to everything, just a few meters away from reaching the end of the mission. He had already begun preparations to summon the High Priest, planning to use the boss to get rid of Ian and Lai. Rukin's plan was to stab Ian and Heron in the back while they were distracted by the boss, then steal from them and flee, hoping to escape the monster, since the three of them couldn't defeat it. Ian was closely watching Rukin the entire time. He noticed Rukin's obvious, unhidden glare and couldn't help but laugh to himself at how poorly he masked his intentions. So he used the distraction to message Heron, warning her that the High Priest would appear soon. He told her that just ahead was a cage that, when touched, would trigger the boss's appearance, and all the exits would be sealed with iron bars. However, the bars took 5 seconds to fully rise. That meant they could fake heading in, and when the moment came, jump back to avoid getting trapped. Heron agreed to the plan and waited for Ian's signal. Ian sped ahead with Lai, ruthlessly wiping out every goblin in his path to disrupt Rukin's setup. When he got far enough ahead, he called for the others to hurry. Rukin didn't seem suspicious and kept pace with Ian, believing he was unaware of the trap. After clearing out a few more monsters, the group moved deeper into the cave until they reached the cage. That's when Ian put the plan into motion. He sent Lai into the High Priest's area, triggering the boss's appearance. Ian counted the seconds in his head, and at the right moment jumped back, grabbing Heron's hand to pull her out, both of them avoiding being trapped behind the iron bars with Rukin and his group. Rukin was shocked and ran up to the cage to confront Ian, asking why he had backed out with Heron. With a mocking tone, Ian asked if Rukin really had the nerve to act surprised, revealing he had known about the trap from the start. He wished them luck in defeating the High Priest. Rukin retorted that even if Ian hadn't been trapped, he still wouldn't be able to leave the cave. The High Priest had already been summoned, and the only way out now was either to defeat the boss or die. Either way, he would be robbed. Ian smiled at this and ordered Lee to attack the group. Lai obeyed and bit them, not enough to deal serious damage, but enough to leave them vulnerable, without Heron's healing. After that, Ayan canceled the summon, sending Lai to a resting room and simply sat back to observe the battle, watching as two giant goblins appeared alongside the High Priest. Rukin couldn't deny he was afraid after seeing those monsters, especially the High Priest. He looked at Ayan and asked if he was stupid enough to underestimate them, declaring they'd defeat the boss and rob him afterward. Ayan calmly sat on the ground and watched, saying he didn't think they could beat the High Priest. At that moment, the system announced that the boss had been summoned, forcing Rukin, Milan, and Falcon to fight. Rukin drew his sword angrily and told them to take out the giant goblins first before facing the priest. Once they finished, they could hunt Ayan. Ayan mocked the situation and dared Rukin to keep his composure no matter what happened. Heron looked at the fight with a bit of fear and asked Ayan if they would be okay. Ayan said that if she was worried about their safety, she could help them from a distance with healing. That could be their punishment for trying to commit player killing. Meanwhile, Rukin clashed fiercely with the giant goblins, his sword striking their axes so hard it began to crack. Milan had trouble matching one giant's strength, and her weapon began to give out too. Rukin managed to hold back one of the giants and landed a clean cut on its neck, causing severe bleeding. But the High Priest, standing at a distance, began casting a healing spell to save it. Rukin noticed and ordered Falcon to interrupt the spell. Falcon hurled his spear like a projectile, hitting the priest in the shoulder. This enraged the giants, who entered a state known as corruption, greatly enhancing their attack and damage, making them even more dangerous than before. The group was caught off guard, unsure how to react, until Heron intervened. She used her staff to bless the giants, boosting their agility. Rukin panicked and called Ayan and Heron crazy for empowering a monster. Ayan couldn't stop laughing at their desperation and told Heron she could buff and heal monsters if she wanted. Angry over Rukin's betrayal, Heron powered them up even more, terrifying the group. Then the system announced that the mission had failed because Rukin had surrendered, admitting his defeat against Ayan. Later that night, Ayan and Heron returned to town with Lai carrying them the whole way. Ayan mentioned they could sell the loot they got from the start of the cave for some quick gold. Heron used the moment to thank Ayan for helping with the camp mission and for the money they'd get from selling the items. Ayan gave her all the credit, saying her role was crucial. Not only could she heal, but she could also buff allies, which was incredibly valuable for a team. They both went to the pawn shop and sold the items, earning 660,000 gold, which Ayan split evenly with Heron. The only item he couldn't sell was a stone with no system description, so he decided to keep it, assuming it needed to be appraised by an expert to reveal its function. After splitting the earnings, they headed to Lepierre's house to officially complete the camp mission and claim all the rewards. Thanks to this, Ayan leveled up to 34 and Heron reached level 46. At that moment, Ayan gave Lepierre a necklace that had belonged to the High Priest, one he had stolen before the mission was marked as failed, thanks to Lei. With the necklace, Lepierre assumed Ayan had completed the mission and gave him an additional reward, enough to push Ayan to level 35. Lepierre expressed curiosity, mentioning that the Watchman had been tracking the High Priest for months without success. He asked Ayan how he found him. Ayan simply said he was lucky. Lepierre didn't believe him, saying that finding the necklace wasn't luck. He handed Ayan a scroll as a reward for his feat. Ayan was surprised. He hadn't expected his little trick to pay off so well, and as soon as he saw the scroll, he instantly recognized it. Lepierre told Ayan that the scroll was an extremely rare reward, but he wanted to give it to him because he trusted in Ayan's power and believed he was ready for his next advancement. It was explained that the scroll was actually a recommendation from Lepierre, which would be sent directly to the Kingdom of Lucipol, allowing players to take the mercenary exam. However, Ayan's case was different. His recommendation wasn't for Lucipol, but for Moran, an elite version of the exam only taken by highly talented players with hidden classes. Ayan accepted the scroll and stored it like a treasure. He didn't plan to take the exam yet, as Moran was far away, and his best option was to hold on to the scroll until he had a mission that brought him there. Only then would he use the recommendation to access the mercenary exam, since he didn't want to interrupt his level-up route. The trip to Moran wasn't just complicated, it was long and demanding. On the other hand, Heron also received a recommendation from Lepierre, who decided to send her to the regular mercenary exam in the Kingdom of Lucipol. Herman accepted the reward hesitantly and asked Ayan about it. He explained that Kalen has 5 major continents. Currently, players could only access 2 of them. The first was Kalinaru and the second was Malkara, the continent they were on at the moment. He also explained that the Kingdom of Lucipol was located in Kalinaru. According to the game's lore, these recommendations allow players to access a feature known as Nation's Heroes. Heron was surprised and thanked Ayan for explaining. However, she had one more question. What benefits did taking the exam offer? Ian explained that completing the exam would grant her the mercenary title, which would unlock many more missions and make them easier to access. On top of that, the number of rewards for missions would increase, and the title could also help her join a guild. He also clarified that the exam wasn't as simple as it seemed, as it would assign a rank based on her combat skills. Heron replied that she wouldn't take the exam for now, since her focus was learning more about Kaylin's cooking system, which required a long journey. Ian asked why she wanted to isolate herself just to cook, and she explained that her leveling path was simply to keep cooking until her cooking skill maxed out or until her main cooking quests became blocked again. Ian didn't say much about it since he didn't know much about that part of the game, but he admired Heron's strong dedication to cooking and thought that if she kept at it, she could eventually make it to the global rankings, even just as a chef. It was then explained that Ian's lack of knowledge about cooking professions was due to changes made after the game's update. One clear sign of this was how eating a dish could now increase player stats. Ian took the chance to ask Heron about her cooking level, and to his surprise, she revealed she was high-class level 1. Ian couldn't believe it. As far as anyone knew, there was no Korean player with such a high rank, at least none publicly known. The top production-level player was a blacksmith at high-class level 3. Ian acknowledged Heron's talent and encouraged her, praising her achievement. After all, leveling up professions was difficult. He told her that if she ever needed help with a quest, she could contact him and he'd do whatever he could. Heron was surprised by Ian's offer and couldn't help blushing a little. She thanked him and said she'd probably be needing his help soon. At that moment, Ian received a friend request from Heron, which he accepted without hesitation. Heron then remembered she promised to cook something for him, so she checked her inventory and gave him a personalized dish. Ian accepted the gift and asked how she made it. She explained that she used ingredients she had gathered from the cave and had cooked while he was busy selling loot. Ian thanked her and checked the contents. He was impressed by the quality of the food. After that, Heron logged off, saying she had to take care of things in the real world. Deep down, she was very grateful for Ian's help, but also hoped he didn't misunderstand her gift. Ian said goodbye and began preparing to resume monster hunting. He had 5 hours left before he had to log out. We changed scenes and saw Ian with Lai exploring the desert. They were both desperately looking for a city so they could travel to other lands. They needed to reach a coastal city by morning, as a transport ship would arrive at a specific time to take players to zones ideal for leveling up. Ian was running late, but luckily, he made it to the city in time. Using Lai's help, he snuck past the guards and saw the ship already starting to sail without him. Panicking, Ian told Lai to jump onto the ship to try to board it. Lai ran at full speed and leaped with all his might, nearly reaching it, but fell short. Ian had no choice but to jump off Lei's back, using him as his springboard. He left Lai behind, canceling the summon to return him to the resting room, and thanks to the momentum, Ian landed inside the ship, barely making it. The passengers on board were amazed by Ian's stunt and approached to question him. After all, he had boarded illegally. Ian explained his situation. Suddenly, a mysterious figure approached from behind and asked if Ian happened to be a summoner. The words made Ian tense up, and he turned to face the man, who wasn't alone. He was with a group of players. Ian confirmed that he was a summoner and asked if there was a problem. The group didn't respond, which Ian found strange. He observed that they were the only other party on the ship and suspected they might be PKs, player killers. So he made a sudden move to draw his bow, but stopped when the group began asking him questions about his wolf. Could they pet him? How did he tame him? And so on. Ian ignored all their questions, still on guard. He asked them if they had a quest on the Death Islands. They confirmed it. One of them explained that 2 of their mages needed help with a mission related to magical ice from those islands, and asked Ian if he had the same quest. Ian felt overwhelmed by the flood of questions but kept calm. The group's leader revealed he was thinking of resetting his character to become a summoner after being inspired by a player named Lauren, known in the game for leveling up incredibly fast. One of Lauren's feats included finding a familiar egg. The leader asked Ian about it, which surprised him. He had never heard of such a thing. At that moment, the leader showed him the egg, which glowed with a blinding golden light that dazzled Ian. The man explained that Lauren found the egg near the nest of a golden owl, but they still hadn't figured out how to hatch it. Based on this info, Ian concluded that Lauren probably hadn't reached level 30 yet. Golden owl hunting zones were only accessible to level 20 players. Still, Ian was amazed to learn that monsters could leave behind eggs. He wondered if collecting and hatching them could lead to tameable creatures. After a while, the ship arrived at the island. The group disembarked onto solid ground. The island was completely frozen, and Ian equipped himself with gear that gave him resistance to the cold. The other players, however, didn't have such gear and began suffering from the island's intense cold. It was their first time visiting the place, Slowly, even Ian began to feel the effects of the cold despite being prepared, so he summoned Lai to gain some warmth. But it was no use. They also began suffering from the cold and eventually caught a cold. Ian checked the map and found his target, so he said goodbye to the group and went on his own. Later, we see Ian near a hunting zone for ice golems. He took a quick break before fighting, exhausted from all the walking. During the break, he ate one of the dishes Heron had prepared and found a meatball, which he gave to Lai. It drastically boosted Lai's combat stats. Ian tried to eat another meatball but noticed it was raw and refused it. Instead, he ate the personalized dish Heron gave him, gaining 500 HP and 30 defense points that would last for 1 hour. But since it was the first time he ate a high-rank meal, he received a bonus reward, a permanent increase of 3 points to all stats. This shocked Ian, who quickly checked his system and confirmed that all of his stats had indeed increased, including his class abilities. After eating, Ian entered the hunting zone and began attacking the ice golems with Lai's help. Meanwhile, back at the common plaza of the Kingdom of Lucipal, we see Rukin, Falcon, and Milan respawning after being penalized for attempting PK. The nearby players didn't hesitate to mock them since they respawned without their equipment. This, of course, angered the group, especially Rukin, who considered the situation a huge embarrassment. So he convinced Milan and Falcon to get revenge, claiming that Ian and Heron were actually weak. He assumed this because they had used the High Priest against them instead of engaging in a direct duel. To ensure his revenge plan succeeded, he contacted a clan and told them what happened, declaring that this act was effectively a declaration of war. As such, all members were now obligated to hunt Ian and Heron throughout Kalen, until they got so frustrated they quit the game. Several hours later, Ian was exhausted from fighting ice golems. He'd been hunting them for more than 10 hours. It didn't just leave him tired, but also frustrated from constantly fighting the same enemy. Still, he had to endure it for the sake of the bet, so he asked Lai if he needed a break before continuing the hunt. Lee made a gesture asking for a short rest, and Ian agreed. As a reward for his good performance, Ian gave him a meatball. That's when he noticed Lai seemed very hungry, so he offered a few more meatballs to keep him motivated. However, Lai refused them, preferring that Ian eat them instead, but Ian reassured him, saying he didn't need the meatballs since he had his own food. He then sat down on a small icy rock and checked the system, curious to see how many ice golems he had defeated in those 10 hours. Upon reviewing, he saw the golems were level 37, the same level Lee currently had. This surprised Ian because the stat difference between Lai and the golems was huge, with Lai having a clear advantage. Still, Ian hoped his second familiar would be even better than an ice golem. He wanted a monster with something unique like Lai, so after resting, he continued the hunt. As they moved forward, they came across a strange group of ice golems gathered near the coast. Ian found this odd but didn't think much of it, at least not until he used his analysis skill and discovered one golem stood out with the golden title. That meant it was the same rarity as Lai in his current evolved form. Ian prepared to give Lai the order. He intended to capture that golem no matter what, but everything changed when he saw an ice turtle appear in the area. It was a creature he had never seen before, so he immediately checked the info. The name of the creature was Abyssal Turtle, and despite its harmless appearance, it was a level 30 unique class monster. Ian had never heard of it, not even on the forums, but seeing it was unique class, he didn't hesitate to prioritize it as his new taming target. He had some doubts since it looked harmless and probably wouldn't be useful in battle, but he took the risk. Whether it was useful or not, it would still count toward the bestiary. Ian slowly approached the turtle. As he did, he felt an intensely hostile aura. Like if he provoked it, he would die in a single hit. Still, he assumed it was just fear of encountering an unknown creature, so he lightly tapped the turtle with his staff. The turtle got annoyed and hid in its shell, which confused both Ian and Lai. Ian tried to capture it in that state, but to his surprise, all his attempts failed. This shocked Ian. It was the first time something like this had happened. So he tried hitting it again to lower its health, but each hit only did 1 damage. No matter how much attack power he used, the result was always the same, just 1 point of damage. Lee tried biting the turtle, but ended up hurting his teeth. Ian had no idea what was going on, so he started thinking of a new plan, either to lower its health faster or find an easier way to capture it. His first idea was to tempt the turtle with food. He pulled out one of Lai's meatballs and placed it in front of the turtle. The aroma caught the turtle's interest and it came out of its shell. Thanks to this, Ian earned 1 point of trust with the turtle. He kept feeding it, hoping to raise that trust until he could safely capture it. After feeding it for a while, Ian made the turtle a deal. If it wanted more food, it would have to join him as his new familiar. The turtle didn't like the idea, but Ian blackmailed it, showing all the meatballs he still had. Left with no choice, the turtle agreed to be captured. Ian celebrated being able to capture a monster of that rarity and immediately checked its stats. What he found left him stunned. The abyssal turtle had the ability to evolve, just like Lai. Among its abilities was one that allowed it to withstand any type of attack, forcing the system to only ever deal 1 point of damage to it, no matter how strong the attack. On top of that, it could regenerate health while hiding in its shell, which also further boosted its already insane defense. But that wasn't all. The turtle's overall stats were that of a regular monster, except for its defense, which was at 725 points. Additionally, its passive multiplied its defense by 5, meaning that at its current level, it could take hits from level 100 monsters without a problem. When Ian looked even deeper into the turtle's info, he saw it had no potential stat. In fact, it was listed as 0. Its affinity stat was just 10, which was extremely unusual, practically impossible, at least based on Ian's understanding of the system. To test the turtle, Ian summoned it and gave it a name, Buki. The turtle clearly hated the name and even headbutted Ian in protest. It didn't do much damage, but it made its opinion very clear. After their little argument, we see Ian standing above the ice golem's nest, watching from a hilltop. Inside the nest, he spotted the golden-named golem again, the one that had disappeared earlier when he got distracted by the turtle. Now was his chance. He launched an attack with Lai. The golem anticipated Lai's movements and retaliated with a heavy blow that made the entire island tremble. It even left a huge crater. Lai dodged the attack and wasn't intimidated by the golem's strength. Instead, he bit down hard, piercing its ice armor. The golem was surprised and stared closely at Lai, waiting for the next move. When the moment came, it counterattacked. Ian sensed strange energy in the golem's next move, and instead of punching, it tried to stomp Lee. Lee dodged the stomp, which turned out not to be a melee move, but a skill called Ice Wave. After the stomp, icy spikes shot up from the ground, sweeping through the entire nest in a wide burst. Ian was pushed back and took some damage. He figured the golem wouldn't be able to use the skill again anytime soon. It was a high-level move and likely had a long cooldown. So Ian took the chance to leap forward, striking the golem in the back with his staff and damaging part of its head. The golem became stunned, giving Lai the perfect chance to attack its weak spot and deal a critical blow that left the monster severely wounded. Ian didn't waste the opportunity and captured it on his first try. After the successful fight, he reviewed the golem's info. Fortunately, it could evolve and its skills included Ice Wave and Frozen Body. The latter allowed it to lower the surrounding temperature by up to 30%, which was perfect for surviving extremely hot areas. However, the golem's biggest weakness was fire-based monsters and attacks, as well as abyss-type monsters, like the turtle. The golem's potential was at 75 points, which was quite useful for Ian, so he decided to nickname the creature Biggie. Now that he had completed his objective, he prepared to leave the island, only to realize that Buki wasn't where he left him. After searching the entire island, he found the turtle on the coast, happily eating fish. Ian quickly picked him up and got back to work leveling up. He had already wasted 2 important days trying to capture monsters for his next plan, but he believed it might have been worth it in the long run. After storing Buki away, he headed toward the icy mountains of Krupia, where he would wait for the next ship while continuing to level up. Meanwhile, at Duke Treppen's castle, we see Heron cooking several dishes, putting into practice the new recipes she learned during the Goblin Camp mission. To her luck, she mastered each dish without trouble, speeding up her progress in the chef profession. Her goal with these dishes was to raise her mastery level as much as possible. She aimed to create meals worth 10,000 gold, which she could later trade for real-world money. Heron was thrilled with her rapid progress and took a small break. All her attributes increased when using a Duke's kitchen, which also boosted the experience she gained from cooking. That's why she was there, and during her break, she wondered what Ian might be doing. So she sent him a message about her cooking progress, telling him she was at the Duke's castle improving her skills. Ian congratulated her, knowing how hard it was to reach a Duke's castle, although he wasn't sure if that difficulty also applied to chefs. He took the opportunity to ask her for a favor. Heron was a bit surprised. Ian didn't seem like someone who would ask for favors. She guessed it might be for a special dish for Lai. Ian explained that he planned to travel to the northern region to level up and needed plenty of food supplies for his summons. Heron agreed to help, mentioning that she had saved some dishes for a future meetup and asked for a meeting location. Ian gave her a spot, then set out on his journey to meet her. Heron, for her part, felt relieved that Ian had contacted her. She was worried she'd have to sell all the food she had made, knowing they weren't high enough quality to sell well. But now she had no concerns, knowing Ian needed them. It was then she realized she was very excited to see him, which made her wonder if she might be feeling something more for Ian. We switch scenes to real life, where Ian is browsing forums for more information about summoners. He wasn't expecting anything new, but to his surprise, he stumbled upon new content. It was an official video from the game's developer. Out of curiosity, Ian watched it. In the video, a popular Korean summoner was being interviewed. When asked about his strongest summon, the player revealed it was a fox he named Coco, which had the ability to evolve. Ian, who happened to be drinking, spat all over the screen. He couldn't believe it. Players were just now discovering familiars that could evolve. Still, it made Ian feel a little proud. It confirmed he was ahead of the entire country when it came to summoner mechanics. He analyzed this a bit deeper and realized it was normal. Not all players had access to the training skill like he did. That skill was only given to players who reset their character for the first time. He looked up more info about the class and found a post about a unique ranked monster. It was another official video, this time showing a Korean player taming the first unique ranked monster. This slightly disappointed Ian. He had achieved that milestone way before the video was posted, but the game hadn't recorded his accomplishment. It didn't bother him that much, but what annoyed him was how people in the video treated the feat like it was easy, when in reality it wasn't. He assumed the summoner in the video probably had the help of friends or a guild. The next morning back in Kalen, Ian logged into the game to meet Heron, who gave him a bag full of dishes. Ian was shocked by the massive amount of food and asked if she was sure she didn't want any payment. Heron insisted she didn't need money, saying that helping her complete the Goblin Camp mission was more than enough thanks. Curious, Ian checked the contents of the bag, and among all the dishes, he saw some extremely rare foods worth a fortune. Ian felt a bit guilty receiving all that for free, so he asked Heron if he could help her in any other way, something non-monetary. She agreed and said she needed help with two things. The first was to gather some ingredients found only in the northern region, and she handed him a list of them. But when it came to the second favor, she felt completely silent, clearly embarrassed. Ian sensed a strange aura from her and couldn't help but feel awkward too. But he tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe the second favor was something dangerous. But no, it wasn't that at all. The second favor was schoolwork. This completely caught Ian off guard. Heron explained that she heard from Gawain that Ian was a student at Korea's most prestigious university. Ian confirmed it, saying he was currently in his first semester. Internally, he found the request a little odd. He was expecting something within the game, not real-life homework. Heron opened up a bit more and said she also studied at the same university in the Hotel Culinary Arts Department second year. Ian agreed to help her and asked about the assignment. Heron said it involved preparing a dish, but she needed someone to taste it and give constructive feedback. Ian accepted, though he found it kind of suspicious. He wondered if she didn't have friends to help her with that. After all, asking someone she barely knows in a game was kind of strange. Still, he didn't dwell on it. He just chalked it up to Heron being a bit eccentric. After the meeting, Ian began preparing for his journey to the northern region, a place full of dangerous missions and with very little info on the forums. Essentially, it was unexplored territory. For that reason, he had to be as geared up as possible to survive. He visited the game's market to buy items that boosted his attributes. The only thing left was a weapon. Out of curiosity, he searched the market for any bow suitable for tamers. During his search, he found a weapon, Steel Knuckles of the Ancient Summoner, which offered a unique ability for tamer classes. Ian bought them and tested them with his summons, starting with Biggie. To see if the weapon worked, he tested it on some basic monsters from the northern region. Biggie knew Ian was in danger, so he protected him with Ice Wave, while Lai circled around the enemy to hit from behind with a critical attack. With just one punch from the knuckles, Ian knocked out the monster. The weapon had several effects that boosted summon performance, such as energy regeneration, increased attack, and more critical damage. These attributes also applied to summons, making it extremely valuable for a master tamer. And if the weapon was used by a hidden class summoner, the player could even use their familiar's abilities, though they had to meet certain conditions during combat. Ian tested the weapon's special ability, and the change was significant. He wondered if Bupuka could be affected too, but immediately dismissed the idea. He didn't want to end up with a shell on his body just because he used Bupuki's skill. He continued testing, recalling the level 30 skills he had unlocked. He started with Spatial Swap, switching places with Biggie, who was ready to tank a direct hit from an ice troll. Ian smiled with excitement seeing how useful that skill was. Before the troll became too much of a problem, he approached it silently and hit it with a powerful punch to the liver. This dealt a critical hit that made the troll stumble, but it wasn't enough to finish it off. However, without realizing it, Ian had fulfilled the conditions of the knuckles, triggering Lai's ability and entering a berserker state. This ability gave Ian increased attack and dexterity, but at the cost of drastically reduced defense, putting him in a risky spot. One hit from the troll could kill him, so he didn't give the creature any chance to recover and unleash a flurry of punches to the liver. The troll was left heavily wounded, wide open for a finisher, and Ian delivered a powerful uppercut, finally taking it down. Meanwhile, in a forest in the northern region, we see the Lotus Guild setting up camp. There, Yu-Hyun was chatting with the guild's vice leader, a girl whose job was to define which zones had been explored and which remained untouched. This information was sent to the game forums to assist veteran players with the latest content. Yu-Hyun congratulated her for taking the risk of marking the forest as an explored zone, but also labeling it as a red area, meaning it was extremely dangerous even for high-level players. The forest was known to spawn ice ogres over level 100 that could appear at any moment, posing a deadly threat even to well-prepared player groups. The girl praised Yu-Hyun in return for his idea to explore the northern region, explaining that with this expedition, they had managed to establish a safe base for the Lotus Guild, a base that could also be used by other non-hostile or allied players. This greatly aided in exploring the uncharted areas of the region. However, she asked Yu-Hyun why he had come up with this idea so suddenly. He explained that the southern continent had already been 100% explored, so the north was the only part that remained largely untouched. They had to be the first to build safe bases for the rest of the players in their own guild. After all, their guild had the support of several top-ranking global players. Therefore, their task was essential for game progression. The girl agreed, saying that in that case, they would have to maintain control of the camp for 3 consecutive months. Only then could it officially be declared a protected area in the forest, allowing players to access it freely. She clarified, however, that even if the area became secure, they would need to keep hunting nearby monsters to prevent invasions, an event that would require the full support of the guild. Yu-Hyun assured her that the guild members would be able to defend the area, with one exception, Ian, who still needed to level up to catch up with them. However, he trusted Ian would reach the northern region soon enough to take part in the plan. The girl took the opportunity to mention that she had recently spoken to Ian. He had asked for all available information about the northern region and said he would support the guild by gathering intel on unexplored areas, which he could supposedly access from the Cropia Mountains. This surprised Yu-Hyun. He asked if she knew Ian's current level, but she replied that it didn't matter much. After all, Ian had made it to the northern region very quickly, even after restarting his character. Naturally, Yu-Hyun grew suspicious and wondered if Ian had gone mad trying to level up in an unexplored region with such high risks. Back with Ian, we find him in the Cropia Mountains with Lai, trying to level up quickly by hunting unknown monsters. However, he wasn't gaining as much experience as expected, and the danger didn't seem worth the reward. Still, he pushed on with his plan. Eventually, he figured out why leveling was so hard. With 2 new summons, his experience was now being split between more familiars, which severely hindered his progress. He barely made it to level 40. He'd figured this might delay his overall plan and thought he probably wouldn't be able to leave his house for at least a week. To distract himself from the stress of leveling, he checked Biggie's status to see how close he was to evolving, and discovered that Biggie had reached his maximum hidden potential. However, he still hadn't evolved, which struck Ian as odd. He theorized that Biggie might require an additional condition to evolve, so he began analyzing what specific factors might be needed for Biggie's evolution. He discovered that each summon required unique conditions for evolution, further complicating the summoner class's progress. At this point, Ian was stuck with Biggie. So, not wanting to waste time, he decided to train Bukbuki, only to immediately realize he'd gone missing again. Worried that a monster might have attacked him, Ian searched the mountain. Luckily, he found Bukbuki nearby digging in the snow. Ian picked him up and noticed that he was eating a mandrake, which drastically increased hidden potential and stats. Ian was shocked and scolded Bukbuki immediately. Mandrakes could be captured as medicinal items and were known to permanently increase all player attributes by 5 points. To prevent another situation like that, Ian convinced Bukbuki that if he found anything valuable, he should bring it to him. And in return, Ian would give him food. Suddenly, Bukbuki ran off and Ian chased after him. To his amazement, the turtle led him to the entrance of an undiscovered ruin, a dungeon that no one had found before. Ian received a system achievement for discovering it, becoming the first player to find this dungeon. Ian didn't hesitate. He entered the dungeon and sent Bukbuki to the front lines to soak up damage from elite monsters. Fortunately, Bukbuki could tank their hits easily. Even critical ones had no real effect on him. Ian put all his trust in Bukbuki and used the distraction to equip his knuckles, attacking the monsters alongside Lai and Biggie. Within minutes, they defeated the first group of monsters. Ian admitted the fight was tough. He was outmatched in strength, resilience, and level, but if he played strategically, he could beat the dungeon. So he explored further after finishing off the first wave. He noticed the hallways were empty, odd for a place like this. He suspected there might be traps and paid close attention to his surroundings. Soon he was ambushed by more enemies, phantom dragons. Thankfully, Biggie froze them using his ice ability. It was the first time Ian had seen such creatures, so he approached cautiously and placed Lai in the back, unwilling to risk losing his strongest summon. Lai was the only one who could potentially get him out in an emergency, so Ian attacked the dragons head-on with Biggie. During the intense battle, Ian realized that the phantom dragons were relatively weak. They had high attack stats but low defense, so he put everything on Lai, sending him to attack from behind. Thanks to this, he managed to take down one dragon. However, the others became enraged and more aggressive. Ian and his summons were forced to dodge and go on the defensive as much as possible. Then he had an idea. He let Babuki take the aggro. The dragons attacked him savagely, but couldn't harm him due to his immense defense. Using his opening, Ian repeated his original strategy and wiped out the dragons with a group attack. Afterward, a mysterious basement appeared in the hallway. It gave off a different aura from the rest of the dungeon, and Ian decided to take the risk and enter. He stopped, however, when a ghostly figure of an old man appeared from the basement. The ghost identified Ian as a summoner and summoned his staff. Ian tensed. Was this ghost the dungeon boss? He didn't lower his guard. The ghost introduced himself as Oakley, a name Ian recognized immediately. He asked why Oakley was in the dungeon as a ghost, but Oakley refused to answer and said Ian would have to defeat him in a duel if he wanted the truth. If Ian won, Oakley would reveal all the secrets of the dungeons and the summoner class. Then Oakley delivered a long speech and summoned the Dragon of Chaos. This terrified Ian. He knew that name from legends told by NPCs across the southern region. Seeing it in person filled him with dread. He analyzed the dragon. It surpassed all his summons in level and was of heroic rank. In his current state, Ian knew there was no way he could win. So he stored his summons and most important gear to avoid losing them. Knowing he would lose no matter what, Ian braced himself and charged with his knuckles. The Dragon of Chaos responded with a roar that lowered all of Ian's stats. Oakley smiled at his bravery and ordered the dragon to unleash a fire breath attack. Ian tried to dodge, but couldn't. The breath exploded across the hallway. Thankfully, Babuki emerged from his rest area just in time, creating a shielded shell to block the dragon's breath and save Ian. But even Babuki could only withstand a few hits from the dragon. Ian realized that maybe the Dragon of Chaos shared the same weakness as the other dragons, so he sent Biggie to use Ice Wave to cool the dungeon, and it worked. They joined in and tried to attack from behind, but the dragon noticed and countered with a massive tail swipe. Biggie jumped in front of the attack to protect Ian and the others, but took tremendous damage, even losing one of his arms. Ian, not wanting to risk Biggie's life, recalled him and left everything to Lai, the only one close enough to fight. To Ian's surprise, Lai managed to injure the dragon, landing a critical bite to its neck. The dragon endured the hit but started bleeding, becoming even more aggressive. Ian was stunned and saw an opportunity to win, but this time, he gave Lai no commands, let him fight on his own. The dragon roared furiously, but Lai didn't flinch, fearlessly attacking again and again. Eventually, the dragon managed to back off and swung its tail once more. Ian immediately used Spatial Swap to switch places with Lai and took Babuki with him, ordering him to block the tail swipe by forming a reinforced shell. Something Babuki managed to do, however, he was still damaged by the shockwave from the attack and was left seriously injured, while Ian also took a considerable amount of damage. That was when Ian realized that the Chaos Dragon could land critical hits with every attack, which guaranteed outrageous damage to its opponents. Then he noticed he had the dragon's attention and ordered Lee to attack. The wolf didn't hesitate and went straight for the dragon's neck again, worsening the bleeding. Still, it wasn't enough to defeat the monster, which responded with a tail whip aimed directly at Ian, prioritizing damaging him. Babuki didn't hesitate to protect him, taking the hit for Ian. Even so, Ian was struck by the shockwave and was left on the verge of death, wondering if he really stood a chance. He reviewed his options and decided to bet everything on a risky victory. He had already invested 24 hours in his current session to level up, and if he died now, he'd lose all that experience. So he came up with a plan. Only Lai could face the Chaos Dragon head-on, so he needed to keep him alive at all costs. But that plan fell apart when the dragon started chasing Lai, trying to devour him. Lee didn't back down. He dodged each of the dragon's bites and kept counterattacking, aiming directly at its weak spot and fighting on his own. Ian was stunned. He hadn't expected Lee to continue like that, and he noticed that the damage the dragon was taking was increasing with every hit to its weak spot. He used his analysis skill and saw that the dragon was close to defeat, but Lai was too exhausted to continue and wouldn't survive the next round. That's when Ian had another idea, and he canceled Lai's summoning to let him rest urgently, leaving only Babuki in the battle. His new plan was to attack the dragon's weak spot himself, using Babuki for defense, and when the time was right, resummon Lei to land the finishing blow. Everything now depended on him. But his biggest challenge was figuring out how to deal damage to the dragon and survive its attacks. In that desperate moment, the Chaos Dragon lunged forward to bite, and Ian saw his opportunity to strike. But just before he could, Oakley canceled the summoning, recalling the dragon so it could rest. Ian was stunned by this and then received a huge amount of experience points. He had passed Oakley's monster tamer trial, and as a reward, he gained experience and officially completed the dungeon. Thanks to this, Ian reached level 43 and let out a relieved sigh. He had conquered the dungeon. But something about it felt strange. He started to suspect that defeating the Chaos Dragon might have been impossible from the start. Ian collapsed to the ground from exhaustion, and Oakley approached to congratulate him on his feat, telling him that Ian was the only person he knew who had ever come close to defeating the Chaos Dragon. However, he clarified that in his current state, Ian couldn't have won, but if he continued progressing, he would eventually be able to defeat the dragon with ease. Oakley praised him for this, revealing that he had been tested all along. Then he asked Ian for his name. Ian introduced himself, and Oakley stared at him thoughtfully. After a moment, he asked Ian if he would be interested in inheriting his summoner legacy. At that moment, a system window appeared. It was a mission offering the chance to obtain a hidden class, Dragon Tamer. If he accepted the mission, Ian would gain the ability to tame any dragon and use them in combat. However, accepting the mission would mean losing his current class. This took Ian by surprise. He didn't know what to do. After all, he had to choose between mastering his current path as a monster tamer or becoming a dragon tamer. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you made it this far, comment the word tamer down below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part.